Maybe you've heard of them, maybe you've seen them on a stage. Tweeds, Tweed Deluxe, that tweed sound. But if you've seen them in a store, you may not have liked them. Personally, I didn't when I first encountered a tweed-wrapped Blues Deluxe. There was definitely nothing wrong with that amp, it just didn't sound any different from any of the other Tweed Deluxes that I've played. And in fact, that was just a special run of Fender Tweed-wrapped Blues Deluxes that they had released. There was nothing vintage, there was nothing inherently tweed about them. So what is this inherent tweed sound, and what makes the storied tweed tone? Let's dive into what makes the Fender Tweed era of guitar amps tick, and we'll find out if you actually have the need for tweed. I had to say that at some point. So Fender Tweed amps specifically refer to an era of time between 1948 and 1960 when Fender was wrapping their amplifiers in a yellowish cloth covering. People actually refer to this covering as tweed incorrectly. It's more of a lacquered twill, which is closer to a denim than it is tweed. We're working on this second channel now, Daniel Tells Textiles. Watch out. These amps had a metal badge on the front that said Fender, followed by Fullerton, California, which was where the Fender factory and headquarters was at the time of the building of these amps. There are several models of the Tweed era. There's Deluxes, there's Champs, there's Twins, there's Bassmans, there's the Tremolux, but it actually goes even deeper. In fact, you have things like the TV front Deluxe or the wide panel Champ, each having different idiosyncrasies making them desirable for their own reasons. I'd recommend checking out a video from Keith at 5 Watt World if you ever want to get deeper into some of these things. He does a great job of covering the full history. What I want to focus on is why these amps are so desirable and what makes them sound so good. The first thing to keep in mind is, with the exception of the Tremolux, these amps are pretty simple amps. There's a very basic EQ section on a few of them. They don't have reverb, they don't have onboard effects. In fact, they don't really get that loud. They tend to go into their breakup pretty early. That breakup and that early breakup is what makes them so desirable because that's such a characteristic sound. Players like Rory Gallagher, Jimmy Vaughn, Jeff Beck, The Edge, Billy Gibbons, they all have Tweed amps on stage. Neil Young has had his Fender Tweed Deluxe with him for almost the entirety of his career, and that's a big aspect of his signature sound. So why all the love for a pretty simple amp? Well, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, it's all about the breakup. A Fender Tweed amp really breaks up like no other, with a biting crunch sound that falls into a flubby fuzz as you turn up the volume. effectiveness of these amps comes from their mid-range. Having such a prominent and cutting mid-range effectively allows them to sit right at home within a mix. Especially with the level of dynamics that a Tweed brings to the table, they're often said to just sound like a record. I personally really love recording with my Tweed champ back there because of how much control you can get just from your playing. The Tweed amps are fairly different from most other amplifiers, but not very different from other Fender amplifiers. Like most Fenders, they employ American-style tubes, like 6V6s or 6L6s, and they'll use Hammond or Schumacher transformers that were common to use during the time. In fact, I've got one of those projector amps, which is a Bell & Howell Filmosound 385's projector amplifier section, which has then been modified into a guitar amp. And it actually uses the same Schumacher transformer that a Fender Tweed Deluxe uses, which may be why it shares the similar touch sensitivity aspect that the Tweeds are known for. A lot of the Tweed era uses smaller Jensen speakers, which may contribute to the breakup. Generally, these amps have a bit of a darker tone, which is maybe why older players kind of like them a little bit more. There's an old story that Leo Fender actually liked to put bright caps on amplifiers and have Fender Telecaster circuitry that would have that ice-picky sound because he suffered from some hearing damage. But these amps kind of don't reflect on that theory, seeing as their top end is almost smooth enough to warrant one of those treble boosters that was fairly popular to have in your guitar rig at the time. So with something like a treble booster adding gain and high end to your sound, the swath of tones that were available to you from these Tweed amps was pretty substantial. There's a lot of great tones you can get out of these amps that are a bit tricky to get with the modern day reproductions, although some of them definitely do get very close. These amps are just so special, not just because they're vintage, but because something was just right when they were invented. Amazingly, these Tweed guitar amps were invented before the first solid body electric was invented in 1951. The goal back then was to get a very loud and clean amplifier to play the popular music of the time, which at the time was big band swing and jazz music. From what I've heard from a few amp repairmen, the Tweed era of amplifiers was known for redundancy and efficiency, with smart and simple circuitry that was just known to be good sounding. Nothing was boutique or special about the Tweed era of amps, especially back then. So maybe it's a fluke that they became very well known for rock and blues. But then again, maybe it's just good amp design from the same guy that brought us the Stratocaster. Anyway, that's the video. Thank you so much for watching. My name's been Daniel McLaughlin. If you enjoyed that video, make sure you hit that like button down below. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.